Hello, it's Tuesday at 12:30 on another glorious day. Wherever you are in the world, I hope that you're having a fabulous and a glorious day too. And I'm so pleased that you can join me again and my special guest this week for this week's edition of the Mindset Michelle TV show. And this week, we have an extra special treat for you. We're so happy that you could join us with the fabulous Rodney Marks. Hello, Rodney.
Hello, Michelle. Hello, everybody.
Hello. So Rodney has a very interesting and varied career because he has 350 different characters that he performs as a comedian. And he's also appeared over 3,500 times in different live shows. So that's a lot of live shows, Rodney, and a lot of different characters. But I'm sure that everybody's really interested in how did you come to be a comedian and how did you come to be not just a comedian, but doing comedy hoax and comedy impersonation? It's not something you really hear about every day.
Well, I trained to be an actor, and then I worked a little bit as an actor and 12 years as an arts administrator, and doing very grown-up jobs. And then when I became grown-up, I think, I decided that that wasn't much fun at all. I'd much rather be having more fun. And so I'd learned some management skills, not great management skills, and certainly not very good financial skills, but management skills. And so I decided, to be a solo performer. And in a different century, it might have been good to have been a dramatic monologuist. But these days, and for the last 30, 40 years, really you have to be a comedian. So in order to be a self-contained, standalone, write your own stuff, perform your own stuff, do your own travel, do your own stage management and so on, you're limited to the genre of comedy. And then within that, we've all heard a lot of highfalutin people say nothing, or maybe say something even worse than nothing. And so it just seemed natural to impersonate those sorts of people and the speeches that they make. So my characters are extremely important people who during the performance disintegrate into fools. And so, it can be a managing director or a psychiatrist or a judge or a politician or a chief executive of a government department or a charity, and or a religious person, religious minister, and they all disintegrate. Of course, not all of these people in real life are fools, but a number of them are, and we shouldn't suffer them gladly. So I do comic monologues at all sorts of events.
Wonderful. And like I said, I don't think many people have really heard it described in that way. I know that people think of stand-up comedy typically when they think of comedy. And also with what you do, there'd be a lot of observational and commentary. Do you think that you've always, what was it from your background that led you to be interested in that kind of observational comedy?
I suppose a very dramatic family life as a child, which is now a long time ago. I'm going to be 65 this year. Here's a fun fact. If you develop Alzheimer's before you're 65, it's called early onset. But once you turn 65, it's just dementia. So, so in October, if I start becoming forgetful or losing my line, well, actually, as an aside, the great thing about being a monologuist is that if you lose your lines, no one knows but you. So I like that. I commend that to your audience. Well, like a professional speaker, I suppose, or a counselor or a coach, you really have your own agenda that you don't share with anyone else. You can beat yourself up afterwards if you, oh darn, I forgot to ask that question, if you're a coach, I suppose, or I forgot to do that funny line, but no one else knows, so it doesn't matter so much. Of course, if you're an actor and you forget to feed someone their line, it's a catastrophe. That's terrible responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very, very different world. And I think it's interesting then because you again would have this different lens by creating so many different characters and looking at life and what people are saying rightly or wrongly. How does that feed in, Len, to what you define and what you think of as success for you and in your life?
Well, I don't feel successful or unsuccessful, really. It's satisfying not to have a day job and never to have had a day job in the last 30 plus years. So I guess that's good. A lot of entertainers have to do something else, maybe something that's not too draining on their creativity, just something they can be automatic at, taxi driving or Uber driving or that sort of thing. Although a lot of comedians these days are professionals, doctors and lawyers and accountants and engineers and architects and so on. I think it would be hard to have that parallel life. Yeah, I'm not smugly satisfied with where I'm at, but it's good to still be doing comedy full time, and it's a strange time now since COVID. I always thought comedy was essential. It was an essential service like mindfulness coaching, but apparently no. It's a luxury good. It's something optional. It's an elective, and so I've been doing some filming, some TV commercials, and a very few corporate gigs that might require travel to areas that, like the Gold Coast, which are usually not in lockdown. But yeah, it's not something I planned for, and I don't think anyone did. But when you've got all your eggs in one basket, on the one hand, you're totally committed. There's no plan B. There's no way out. So you just keep doing it, and by mere practice, you become better at it than if you did it once a week. But then if there's a catastrophe like COVID, you're kind of left high and dry. But at least you know who you are and what work there is comes your way, and we all hope that COVID will lift.
Yeah, and I think that that the times that we live in are quite strange, and I like your observation around the focus and the concerns around sporting activities continuing, but the arts, whether it's comedy or music or whatever, which actually lift people's souls and spirits when things are tough, when times are tough, have actually really suffered. So that there has been that kind of contrast in priorities, if you like.
Now, I don't know if you can hear, but at the
can.
moment, Deborah and I'll just go and get the product of the noise making.
So Rodney's just going to grab his beautiful little granddaughter, who we're very lucky is an extra special guest as well on the show, who may be joining us with her grandfather. So here we go.
This is Hannah. Hannah, this is Michele. Michelle's a friend of Popper's.
Hello,
and
beautiful.
Hannah is meant to be asleep.
Aren't
you? You're meant to be asleep, but you're in your cot. You're in your cot. So this is one of the joys of COVID. We get to see more of Hannah because her parents, who are documentary filmmakers, our son Joshua and daughter-in-law Carly, doco.tv, they are working from home. And it's hard to work from home, isn't it, Hannah?
Oh, okay. Hello, Hannah.
You say bye-bye. Oops. You say bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, Hannah.
Good girl.
Have a lovely sleep, Hannah. That's beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing. I must credit Hannah as a guest appearance on the show today.
Yes, she's a delight, and it is yes, it's the um, the reward for being a parent. Yeah, to be a grandparent. You know
Beautiful.
why grandparents and grandchildren get on so well? Common
Why?
enemy. Common enemy. And so on. There's a new repertoire of gags. Yeah.
I'm sure that COVID has also provided a whole new repertoire of gags around being in lockdown, and it applies to you unless you're a football player or a politician, or all of those other categories where you don't have to wear masks or not have parties. All of those sorts of
Well,
exemptions to those.
we're in Waterloo, next to the Meriton Service Departments, where there's been an outbreak, and so now at our apartment building's entrance and next door, there are police and security guards. It's like it's nothing that you really could have predicted. It's absolutely remarkable. But Waterloo's in Sydney, Australia, is becoming so gentrified that it's having a name change. It's going to be called Eau de Toilette from now on. There you go. There you
Instead
go.
of being about the water in the loo, it's going to be
That's
about the
it.
toilet. That's gorgeous, Rodney.
Yeah.
And in preparing for today, a lot of the people and a lot of comments I was seeing in social media, people were interested in how you can use that kind of humour or making those observational comedies in the workplace. And so if we turn now and look at, well, what is some of the keys? You've had quite a long and distinguished career. What would be some keys around mindset that you would say would be gifts that you could give to people about how to get through, your world turning upside down because they decided to have a party in the building next door to you. So you can't plan for all of these sorts of things. What would be some of your tips?
Well, I've observed, of course, people using humour successfully and unsuccessfully, and those who use it successfully generally are self-deprecating. So if you make a comment, not self-hating, that's important not to be self-hating, but if you make a comment about yourself, your appearance or your anxiety about COVID, that's completely different to talking about someone else's age, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual persuasion, all of those identity markers that can be said with terrifically good intent and no harm meant, but there's no way you can judge how it will be received. I think whether professionally or just as a general human being, telling a joke is an act of courage, because sometimes joke telling will fail and you look like an idiot. So, and worse than that, you can be hauled in front of HR for violating a code of conduct. So you can make comments about. Do you think you just go and sit in there with her? She seems very happy, babbling away. Very happy.
She's doing her own personal monologue.
Yeah. I think it's an interior monologue, but she's enjoying it. She's absolutely amazing. I forgot what it was like to have a 2-year-old. They're full of joy. Yeah, a lot of people come a cropper with the status aspect of comedy. So if you're a superior in a firm, whether it's either a charity, a non-profit, a government department, or a business organization, if you're a senior person and you're making fun of a junior person, that's most likely going to fail, because then the comedy is weaponized. But making jokes about the boss are kind of okay, and usually are received even by the boss. with better grace than the other direction. I think that's the one of the keys of humour, to take the mickey out of authority. It's a very Australian thing to do, to level a hierarchy. You might be my boss, but I know more about some aspect of life that you don't know anything about.
Yeah, you might be my boss, but you don't know what it's like to change a nappy, a 2-year-old's nappy at 65, that sort of thing. You may be may have a Nobel Prize or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Nobel Prize as well. What do they know? They've spent 40 years in a lab looking down a microscope. They don't know anything about life. Yeah. So it's funny. I've been Nobel laureates, and the respect people give you is amazing. I've been a king and Pulitzer Prize winner and professor, all these high status things. And then as people get to realize that you're just a regular guy, and even worse, a comedian who is lower status than you, that their attitude to you changes. But it does give you a feeling like, wow, if you were, head of cardiology at a particular hospital, you would just be loved day and night. It would give you so much status. If you're prime minister, if you were a judge, people just give you, and like, you could be a terrible judge, you could be a terrible prime minister, but just because of your status. And same goes with wealth. Oh, he drives a Maserati. Wow, I must get his opinion about something completely unrelated because everyone is a Renaissance person.
It's interesting with the mindset stuff as well around that when people lose their role or they lose this or that, and then it comes back to them again, and they have to work through, how much of themselves they saw in the role or the Maserati or whatever it might be. And they lose sight of their value as a person outside of those roles or the Maserati. But you're right, it's a two-way street because the world around them treats them differently.
Yeah.
In fact, I used to do little experiments that I'll still every now and then do. But I remember going into the bank and dressing casually and going, oh, they're treating me badly. This was back in the days when we used to go into the bank in person. And then going in dressed up in a business suit like now and going, oh, okay, yeah, this is really interesting. I'm the same person, same amount of money in the bank, but just the perception because of how I was dressed just completely changed how they behaved and treated me.
Well, that's fantastic. You didn't need to do character comedy to come to that conclusion.
No, it didn't take 350 attempts or 3,500. That's pretty impressive. Oh, so what would be another tip that you might want to share with people about creating that successful mindset?
Well, through the use of humor, you can kind of role play to the extreme. Customer service, which you've alluded to, is one way of doing it. It is for NAB. A couple of years ago, I was an ultra high net worth individual talking to a room full of bankers dealing with personal wealth management, and someone came up to me and said, what's it like being a high net worth individual? I had to correct them. I said, no, I'm an ultra high net worth individual. And apparently the cutoff is if you have $50 million disposable, ready to allocate to any particular bank. And they were so apologetic, and it's like, it's just so if you feel bad, you can just pretend to be an ultra high net worth individual, and don't even tell anybody. It just washes over you. It is a bit of don't you know who I am? The classic joke. The Prime Minister goes to a nursing home and says to an elderly resident, do you know who I am? And the lady says, no, but if you ask sister, she'll tell you. And I just, so many people in many different ways tell you don't you know who I am? They drop that they've just been on a holiday somewhere glamorous, or that they've bought a glamorous item, or that, you know, their prestigious, their clothing, which is just a costume, of course, as you alluded to. The suburb they live in, the school, especially in some towns in Australia, for instance, if you're in Melbourne or Adelaide, it's very important that you mention the high school you went to. You know, on the Gold Coast or Sydney, it's important to mention the suburb you live in, all of that kind of nonsense. But, you know, not to be too impressed by it. And to know
Yeah,
who
I'm
you
sure
are.
it's asking anybody that lives in Mosman about wealth management advice or something like that, because they live in Mosman, yeah.
Well, if you can't marry well, at least divorce well. I think that's the
That's the trick, eh?
that's the truth. Yeah, yeah. It's never too late to divorce well, but of course you have to marry well to start with.
You do. And
Well,
I like
there's
that about role playing, because again, in my world, it would be acting as if, so building that confidence. So you role play, you know, somebody that's confident going for the job that you want to get, or role play getting the clients that you want to get by actually, like we're alluding to, that, you know, presenting the image that you think the client wants to see, so that they then buy the services from you or buy the products from you as the ultra net high worth in whatever field that you're in.
I can see that you're kind of like a theatre director, Michelle. I can see that, and your colleagues are the actors, and you're giving them motivation tips and scripting tips and movement tips. I can see that. You're also a bit of a choreographer. Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, you know, as Shakespeare says, life's a stage, and we're all just going through the different acts of that stage.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. He was so wise. Amazing. He invented the human being.
He did. He said a lot of different profound things at the time. And a third tip, maybe, what would be a third thing that you might share with people today?
Um, you know, sometimes I go for auditions for a TV commercial or something, and there's no connection with how I feel I did and how and whether or not I get the work. And you never know whether you get the work until sometime afterwards, or almost never. Um, and so I have a database for my comedy performances, and I self-evaluate, and I also rate what the client says. So my self-evaluations go from pathetic to okay to good to great to career high, of which there are very few, obviously, by definition. Um, and the client's feedback, which could be booking for another gig or a testimonial or something like that. The client's feedback, I just rate, you know, A, B, C, D, E. And there is no overlap. There is no overlap. It's amazing. I've over thousands of performances. So either I'm too self-critical, or a lot of time the people who book a comedian, it's their first and perhaps their only time when they ever book someone. So either they expect them to be brilliant, or they have no expectations, you know, and it's easy for you to exceed those expectations. It's just like you're forever educating clients on what to expect. Yeah. So don't take praise, don't take criticism, but be brutal with yourself. Yes, self-criticism, self-praise.
And that's a really important point, I think, about listening to your own feedback, as opposed to what the world or the what's happening outside says to you. Most people do know, I think, if they do well or don't do well, but they may not be as brutally honest, like you're saying, with themselves, and that can skew their own results. But also then, really importantly, like you're saying, not using it to keep flagellating yourself, but to, you know, learn from and develop and grow.
Yeah. I mean, you and I are both involved with the Professional Speaking Association in Australia. And many years ago, I was asked on a panel, what do you do if you fail on stage? Which is a reasonable question, because you will fail. And I said, you just deal with it, you speak to a friend, you have a cohort of a support group, and you try and minimize the distance between events. And sometimes it's something extraneous, the lighting, the microphone, the stage, but mostly it's your fault. So if it is your fault,
my worst one was actually where the guy presenting before me presented exactly the same material as me. That was like, how do you come back from that one?
Oh, man.
Please continue, Rodney. That was interesting to deal with at the time.
Well, what you are doing by acknowledging that is amazing and very rare. The head of a speakers agency, who's since no longer head of a speakers agency, said, she was on the panel, and she said, I would never book anyone unless they would guarantee to be successful 100% of the time. So the people that she booked either were lying to themselves, or that is self-deluded, or hustling her, because no one can make that guarantee. So some comedians and comedians I admire tell jokes, and the jokes usually fail. So then they have saves, and a lot of their act becomes the save. And that's sort of meta comedy in a way. But no matter what field you're in, you can develop ways of coming back if you're presenting. If you're presenting a serious topic and it's not working, the metaphors aren't working, the analogies are not working, the level of usage of your language is too high or too low, whatever, you can, because you're working live, you can claw your way out of it by having a repertoire of saves.
Yeah, and I think that's what comes with experience, being able to, like you're saying, claw your way out of it, because although you turn up with the best of intentions, like I did that day, and then you watch the person beforehand to gauge the audience, etc. When you literally see the same examples being used and same exercises, you adapt, because you have to, and that's part of what you learn to do. And like you're saying, I like that example of saves. You use different things to keep the audience going with you on your journey.
Well, you're so professional to turn up before your presentation time slot to watch the people or the person before you. Imagine if you hadn't, that would have been a catastrophe. So
yeah, it would have been interesting to have gone in and then not known why it wasn't connecting with the audience. So for our audience today, how can they contact you? How can they get in touch with you, Rodney?
LinkedIn is probably the best way. Yeah.
So if I go to Rodney Marks on LinkedIn, then that's the best way to connect. Fabulous. And if you were to give some advice to that younger Rodney who was studying theatre and doing all of that very hard work, learning scripts and everything, what would you say to your younger self? What advice would you give your younger self?
Probably to be less in awe of one's teachers and more in awe of the audience. So yeah, the audience are co-creators in comedy and maybe in other live presentations as well. They help you with your pausing and with your material. But I was very over-influenced by my teachers who, on reflection, you've got to follow the money. They're being paid by a university, not by the audience.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And maybe their view of the world was a generation out of date. It's quite good being a comedian, because you don't seek approval from intermediaries.
But unfortunately, that's it for today. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Rodney.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. I'm a big fan of yours, and I know you visited my family and myself at our work at Fox Studios, and it was good to see you there. Hope to see you there again.
It was my honour, and thank you so much. It was really beautiful to meet the baby and everybody in person. And but thank you for your time, Rodney, and to everybody out there, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.